afternoon, YouTube. Today, I want to bring to light this story about Twitter censoring the Hunter Biden scandal. Jack Dorsey is going to be standing before this committee and answering to Ted Cruz. So thank you for watching, and I'll make my comments afterward.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. The three witnesses we have before this committee today collectively pose, I believe, the single greatest threat to free speech in America and the greatest threat we have to free and fair elections. Yesterday, I spent a considerable amount of time speaking with both Mr. Zuckerberg and Mr. Pichai. I have concerns about the behavior of both of their companies. I would note that Facebook is at the minimum at least trying to make some efforts in the direction of defending free speech. I appreciate their doing so. Google, I agree with the concerns that Senator Klobuchar raised. I think Google has more power than any company on the face of the planet. And the antitrust concerns are real. The impact of Google is profound. And I expect we will have continued and ongoing discussions about Google's abuse of that power and its willingness to manipulate search outcomes to influence and change election results. But today, I want to focus my questioning on Mr. Dorsey and on Twitter. Because of the three players before us, I think Twitter's conduct has by far been the most egregious. Mr. Dorsey, does Twitter have the ability to influence elections?
No.
You don't believe Twitter has any ability to influence elections?
No, we are one part of a spectrum of communication channels that people have.
So you're testifying to this committee right now that Twitter, when it silences people, when it censors people, when it blocks political speech, that has no impact on elections?
People have choice of other communication channels with which...
Not if they don't hear information. If you don't think you have the power to influence elections, why do you block anything?
Well, we have policies that are focused on making sure that more voices on the platform are possible. We see a lot of abuse and harassment, which ends up silencing people and having them leave from the platform.
All right, Mr. Dorsey, I find your opening questions, your opening answers absurd on their face. Let's talk about the last 2 weeks in particular. As you know, I have long been concerned about Twitter's pattern of censoring and silencing individual Americans with whom Twitter disagrees. But 2 weeks ago, Twitter, and to a lesser extent Facebook, crossed a threshold that is fundamental in our country. 2 weeks ago, Twitter made the unilateral decision to censor the New York Post in a series of 2 blockbuster articles, both alleging evidence of corruption against Joe Biden, the first concerning Ukraine, the second concerning communist China. And Twitter made the decision, number one, to prevent any user, from sharing those stories. And number two, you went even further and blocked the New York Post from sharing on Twitter its own reporting. Why did Twitter make the decision to censor the New York Post?
We had a hack materials policy that we...
When was that policy adopted?
In 2018, I believe.
In 2018, go ahead. What was the policy?
So the policy is around limiting the spread of materials that are hacked. We didn't want Twitter to be a distributor for hacked materials. We found that the New York Post, because it showed the direct materials, screenshots of the direct materials, and it was unclear how those were attained, that it fell under this policy. Now,
so in your view, if it's unclear the source of a document, and in this instance, the New York Post documented what it said the source was, which it said it was a laptop owned by Hunter Biden that had been turned into a repair store. So they weren't hiding what they claimed to be the source. Is it your position that Twitter, when you can't tell the source, blocks press stories?
No, not at all. Our team made a fast decision. The enforcement action, however, of blocking URLs, both in tweets and in DM, in direct messages, we believe was incorrect. And we changed it.
Today, right now, the New York Post is still blocked from tweeting 2 weeks later.
Yes, they have to log into their account, which they can do at this minute, delete the original tweet, which fell under our original enforcement actions, and they can tweet the exact same material from the exact same article, and it would go through.
So, Mr. Dorsey, your ability is you have the power to force a media outlet. Let's be clear. The New York Post isn't just some random guy tweeting. The New York Post has the fourth highest circulation of any newspaper in America. The New York Post is over 200 years old. The New York Post was founded by Alexander Hamilton. And your position is that you can sit in Silicon Valley and demand of the media that you can tell them what stories they can publish, and you can tell the American people what reporting they can hear. Is that right?
No, this was a, every person, every account, every organization that signs up to Twitter agrees to a terms of service. Terms of service is
so
published.
Media outlets must genuflect and obey your dictates if they wish to be able to communicate with readers. Is that right?
Exactly. Yep.
No, not at all. We recognize an error in this policy, and specifically the enforcement.
You're still blocking their posts. You're still blocking their posts. Right now, today, you're blocking their posts.
Yes,
We're not blocking the post. Anyone can tweet.
Can the New York Post post on their Twitter account?
If they go into their account.
No is your answer to that. No. Unless they genuflect and agree with your dictates. Let me ask you something. You claimed it was because of a hacked materials policy. I find that facially highly dubious and clearly employed in a deeply partial way. Did Twitter block the distribution of the New York Times' story a few weeks ago that purported to be based on copies of President Trump's tax returns?
We didn't find that a violation of our terms of service and this policy in particular, because it was reporting about the material. It wasn't distributing the material.
Okay, well, that's actually not true. They posted what they purported to be original source materials, and federal law, federal statute makes it a crime, a federal felony, to distribute someone's tax returns against their knowledge. So that material was based on something that was distributed in violation of federal law, and yet Twitter gleefully allowed people to circulate that. But when the article was critical of Joe Biden, Twitter engaged in rampant censorship and silencing.
And again, we recognized errors in that policy. We changed it within 24 hours. This is.
But you're still blocking the New York Post. You haven't changed it.
We have changed it.
You
They
still
can log
blocked
into their account, delete the original tweet.
You forced the Politico reporter to take down his post about the New York Post as well. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Within that 24-hour period, yes. But as the policy has changed, anyone can tweet.
So
the
Twitter
post.
takes you can censor the New York Post, you can censor Politico, presumably you can censor the New York Times or any other media outlet. Mr. Dorsey, who the hell elected you and put you in charge of what the media are allowed to report and what the American people are allowed to hear? And why do you persist in behaving as a Democratic super PAC, silencing views to the contrary of your political beliefs?
Let's give Mr. Dorsey.
No, let's not, because everything out of his mouth is a lie anyway. Let me just summarize with this. This is the real criminal of America, and if I were a judiciary body, specifically a judge handling this case for censorship, he would be found guilty. So I would like an example to be made of him in the federal courts. And that way, say he could go to prison for 20 years, for example. That would be a hell of a demonstration to serve as an example for future people that were planning to do this sort of thing. Because let's admit it, the facts point to guilt. He's still censoring the New York Times. He still censors Politico. And he says that as long as they take down the Hunter Biden story, the Hunter Biden post, that their accounts will resume normal activity. So that's an admission of deliberately censoring them. So Amy Barrett just got sworn in, I guess you could say, and she's now a formal Supreme Court judge. And I'm hoping that, God willing, if Trump is reelected, that they will do something radical to the laws that are, in my opinion, deeply, deeply out of date, and fail to cover the new circumstances that were created in the last 20 years, and to close the loophole that these people are using to protect themselves from what is obviously a very biased stance. And they are not fans of free speech in practice. They are not free speech people. And again, the power that they wield is tremendous. It's tremendous amount of power and influence they hold over us, whether we admit it or not. Jordan Peterson once said that the technology of social media that we as human beings don't fully understand. And I guess what I can say, if I would speak for him, what he meant is that our minds are not, we don't go deeper than the functionality of Twitter. There are a few of us that probably do, that are critical of it, and rightly so. But we're not, beyond its function, we don't really care about the parameters in which it serves. And the agenda that Twitter has behind the scenes is very, very dangerous and very deeply destructive for America, because of the withholding of information and truth, and the confusion that it would cause, because of course they're going to be pushing leftist ideology, and they should be held accountable. And I think this guy should go to prison for a long time. You heard it that Ted Cruz said of the three of them, Google and Facebook and Twitter, that this one is the most egregious, and I agree. So I think that he should be made an example of. So thank you for watching, and I hope that President Trump, despite all the nonsense going on in the media, the smear campaign, protecting Joe Biden and whatnot from a man should be judged by the strength of his enemies, and Trump is an extraordinary man to face off against the tech giants, the news, phony media, corrupt Democrats. I mean, he has no shortage of enemies, and I hope that Americans respect his integrity, his character, a strong man that is righteous, I would say, to lead America. And I hope 4 more years, because what you can say about Joe Biden is that if he gets a fair trial, he could go to prison, and so could Hunter Biden, and so could members of his family, because they've been involved in corruption scandals since they've ever been in government. Thank you for watching.